Hi, everybody. Thank you all for coming. We've got our guest speaker first. He's going to run through the whole reason that we're working through this class and maybe considering becoming a personal trainer as a full-time job or something to get you started in the fitness industry before you go on to other things. We have couple physical therapy and sport management.
Okay.
So, floor is yours.
Thank you for having me here. It's been probably 3 years since I've done any guest speaking, not necessarily here. I have done it here before, but I used to go to a lot of different colleges and universities, and I all kind of stopped when COVID came around. And I've lost contacts, and people just have not reached back out. And honestly, I haven't been proactive to reach out to them either. But anyway, I believe that my topic today is understanding credentials in the fitness industry, and I do have probably more information than the time will permit, and probably more information than you really want or need at this point, but I will do my best to tailor it to what you really want to know. So real quick background information. My name is Mike, by the way. I'm the Director of Certification for NETA, which is the National Exercise Trainers Association. NETA is one of the many organizations in the fitness industry that offers certifications for exercise professionals. Our two primary certifications are group exercise instructor and personal trainer. And then in addition to that, we have quite a number of specialty certificates, which are not technically certifications, but in the industry, those terms kind of get abused. So I've actually been with NETA for a long time. I started with them way back in 1996 when they first started to develop their personal training certification. So I was one of the original people that hired to develop it and then to go out and teach the review workshops that would lead up to the certification exam. And that was just my part-time job in addition to all the full-time gigs I had over the years as well. But for the last 11 years now, I've been full-time with NETA as their Director of Certification. And my primary job, although we're relatively small, so we wear a lot of hats, but my primary job is to oversee our two NCCA accredited certification programs, which is the group exercise and personal trainer. So, and then I also oversee our education department, but they kind of work independently. We just touch base directly. In fact, our Director of Education lives in Missouri, so I only see her remotely once a week. But the topic then today is trying to sort out this mess that we call certification in the fitness industry to hopefully give you guys some good ideas about where you should look and what you should look for. Before I jump, and I do have handouts for you. I'm always hesitant to give those out because then I know you're going to read ahead and you're going to know everything I say before I say it, then it's not that exciting anymore. But before I jump into it, what kind of questions do you have off the bat? Because usually we save those for the end, but I'd like to know what you want to know off the front side so that I can kind of go right to that information. So yes, sir. What would you like to know?
So when you just said like there's a difference between like the group trainer certification and the personal trainer, what would like the difference you need? What are like the different things you need to like earn?
Well, there are definitely some things that overlap between the two, like the exercise sciences, the anatomy, kinesiology, biomechanics. Those types of things are going to be similar. Probably the depth of knowledge will be slightly greater for a personal trainer, but then there is other areas that are going to be more specialized to either a personal trainer who typically is working one-on-one with a client or in relatively small groups. And I define a small group as 3 or less people. So 3, 2, or 1 people with one trainer. Group exercise is going to be larger groups. We hope greater than 4 people, but usually these are teens to 20s to even bigger groups of people. And you're kind of leading a choreographed exercise routine for them. The differences might be, well, group exercise instructors generally don't do pre-participation health screening, but that is something that a personal trainer does. So they would have to have knowledge and skill in doing that type of thing, as well as assessments and then individualized program design from that information. Whereas a group exercise instructor may or may not know who's coming to their class. They just know the format of the class and what they're going to do even before they get there. So they don't have as much, if any, of that individualized component to it. And generally speaking, group exercise instructors oftentimes probably work more on a part-time basis. And although a lot of personal trainers do as well, the likelihood that they could make a full-time career out of it is greater. Teaching group exercise classes 8 hours a day every day, it's not doable. It's exhausting, yes. So good question. Any other questions? There will be some, I'm sure. So
is there a requirement for previous knowledge before taking either of the exams?
Well, if you want to pass the test, then there's an unwritten requirement that you should have the knowledge. But in terms of formal education, no. For personal training certifications, there aren't any in the fitness industry right now that have a prerequisite of any sort of formal education before you can sit for the exam. Generally speaking, the two prerequisites are going to be at least 18 years of age or older, and or have a high school diploma or a GED. That's pretty consistent across the board. The other one is to have adult CPR AED certification, and even that is a little variant based upon the organization. But from our perspective, those are the two minimum criteria. One thing to keep in mind, and I can't recall if this is actually part of the presentation or not, but a certification does not educate. A certification tests. It's testing your knowledge. So how you obtain that knowledge is irrelevant to us. If you pass the test, you pass the test. Okay. In fact, in accordance with accreditation standards, we cannot require you to utilize our study resources in order to take our test. And because of that, the test is actually not going to contain anything that is proprietary to our materials. The information on the test is considered to be criterion based. So it's a standardized test that is derived from the universe of information, not just ours. Not many people know that, because when you look at organizations, they oftentimes weave these two things together, but they are technically, there should be a firewall, a separation between the two. And that is to avoid potential bias or teaching to the exam and things like that. All right, so anything else? They're good questions. I have notes, and you're gonna have everything I intend to say in the handouts. I may or may not actually say it, but you'll have everything I intend to say in there. I've only done this presentation live once before, and that was up at a conference in St. Cloud last year. We tried to do it at our Fit Fest last year, but you know how many people registered for this captivating topic? One person. It is one that I'm hoping you're going to say, wow, I'm glad I know that. And probably every one of you is going to know more than the typical fitness director out there after this.
That's the scary part, right there.
Because a lot of them just do not know this. They should, but they don't. So we're going to start with a quick definition so that you understand what the terms are, what they mean, how to use them correctly, and when not to use them, ideally. So a certification, that's really the heart of what we work on, what I work on personally. A professional certification is voluntary, which means it's not required by law. There are currently not any states or jurisdictions in the United States that require you to have a personal training certification in order to call yourself or work as a personal trainer. So it's a voluntary credential. It's issued by a non-government organization. It's either a nonprofit organization like we are, or a for-profit company who is trying to make money by selling certifications or access to certifications. This credential, this professional certification, is granted to those who have been evaluated against a predetermined standard, which is typically the certification exam. You pass it, and the prerequisites, which, like I said, are typically age, high school education, and AED CPR. Okay, but if you can jump through those things, then you're certified. There isn't any educational requirements per se, but again, you have to have the knowledge to pass the test. Specialty certificate, which in other industries is called an assessment-based or a curriculum-based certificate program. In the fitness industry, a lot of times we call them specialty certifications, but technically they are certificates. The difference here is that the education is directly linked to whatever the assessment happens to be. If there is an assessment, sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. Sometimes it's just a participation award. You showed up and you went through the program, you get the certificate, which the industry incorrectly calls a certification. And I'll admit we do it too, because if we don't, then our competitors are going to take people away from us by calling it what it isn't. So it's kind of a sensitive topic, if you will, in the fitness industry. But the only way to get that certificate is to go through the educational program offered by the company or organization that offers the end result, the certificate. So they're usually more focused, which means they focus on a subset of the greater population, like youth or older adults or pre-postnatal, somebody within the population, but not the entire population. Or they focus on a specific modality, like a kettlebell or indoor group cycle, or TRX, or they focus on a certain type of training, whether it's yoga or Pilates or something like that. So they're more focused. They should be built upon a primary certification, an actual certification, but oftentimes they are not, because most organizations don't require you to have anything to pursue one of these. Unfortunately, in the fitness industry, it's become kind of out of control with the number of specialty certificates that are out there, and they may or may not actually have value. It depends on your employer and what you're doing with it. The negative side, I would say, from my personal opinion, is that a lot of employers now are accepting specialty certificates in lieu of an actual accredited certification. And the dangerous part about that is because it's so narrowly focused, it's not assessing whether or not you have this overarching universe of knowledge upon which the specialty certificate was built. And most of the time, specialty certificates are open book exams, if there's an exam at all. So it's not really a valid, reliable, or legally defensible measurement of somebody's knowledge or competency. That's not to say they're not valuable, because they do have a place, but they should not be a replacement for an actual certification. And I'll show you another slide on that in just a second, but a few other things to keep in mind. Registry. Registry is basically a database of individuals or entities that have met specific requirements to be registered. And in our industry, there's really two examples of that. The U.S. Registry of Exercise Professionals. This is maintained by CREP, which is the Coalition for the Registration of Exercise Professionals. Any organization that offers an accredited certification, whether it's NCCA accredited or ANSI ISO accredited, they can be eligible to join this coalition. And when they join the coalition, then their certificates are entered into the registry. But it's a voluntary process, and it costs a ton of money to be a part of this. So right now, of the 13 or more organizations that would qualify, there's only 5 that participate. So it has these certificates from those 5 on the registry, but it's not everybody. It's certainly not everybody. So, but if you were to say I'm a registered exercise professional, you could do that genuinely if you were actually on the registry. Otherwise, there isn't any state that actually has a registry for exercise professionals. Another one is Yoga Alliance. This is actually just a registry of yoga instructors who have gone through a Yoga Alliance approved program, whether it's at the 200, 300, or 500 level. And then having completed that program, they can apply for and pay to be on the registry. And then there would be a registered RYT, registered yoga teacher at the 200-hour level, or 300 or 500 or whatever it happens to be. These are trademarked. The only way you can actually use that is if you're actually on the registry. And there are a lot of people who call themselves RYT 200s who are not on the registry, because it's a voluntary process and they're not breaking the law per se. So nobody's out there trying to catch them and penalize them. So sort of, you have to do your diligence to make sure that the credentials people say they have are actually legitimate. RYS is a registered yoga school. So to get here, you have to go through a school that is a registered yoga school through Yoga Alliance, and then again apply to be on the registry. NITA is a registered yoga school. So our 200-hour yoga teacher training program is registered with Yoga Alliance. When they complete our program, they can apply for registration on Yoga Alliance's registry, but they're separate from us. We're an approved school, but we're separate from the registry. We don't maintain that. We don't have anything to do with that. A license is something you get to drive your car. A license is issued by a government, either at the local, state, or federal level. In occupations, it grants you permission to engage in a certain business or occupation. Exercise professionals are not licensed. Again, there isn't any state or jurisdiction in the United States that will license an exercise professional, with one exception, and that is the state of Louisiana, which does have a clinical exercise physiologist license. So in order to practice in the clinical setting in Louisiana, you have to have the state license to do so. But outside of that, there isn't any place in the United States that you can get a license as an exercise professional. For a brief period of time in Washington, D.C., think back in probably 2014, they did pass a law in D.C. that would have licensed personal trainers. It was actually law, but it was never enforced, and it was quickly repealed because of some significant pushback from certain people in the fitness industry, certain companies in the fitness industry that lobbied to get it repealed. So it was repealed and it was never put into action. Continuing education credits or units, these are just measurements of time you spend in continuing education. So it serves as kind of your record of activities or attendance or participation in things that are qualified as continuing education to maintain your other credentials. Probably not of great importance right now. The certificate of completion then is simply the document that shows how many CECs or CEUs were earned for a particular activity that you attended or participated in or whatever. That becomes more important after you're certified, because in order to maintain those certifications, you have to accumulate a certain number of CECs or CEUs, and the documentation of those comes in this format. Those documents, that certificate, if you will always include important information like your name, of course, the name of the activity, the dates of the activity, the number of CECs or CEUs that were approved, and then all of the organizations that approve them. And each organization then will either assign a course number or a provider number for that specific activity or that CE provider. So all of that information is on there so that we have record of what you've done in order to fulfill the requirements for recertification. It's beyond the scope of this, but getting CECs approved it's a big ordeal in the fitness industry. It's kind of behind the scenes, but there's a lot of money exchanged between organizations to get CECs approved and to get providerships approved. And some organizations really capitalize on their brand recognition to get money through CEC approvals. So leave that discussion for another. It's not a bad thing. It's just the nature of free enterprise, I guess. Let's see. So that serves as your record. Accreditation does not apply to any of us because accreditation is not something that an individual gets. Accreditation is something that a credentialing program gets when it's evaluated against some predetermined standards of a third-party accrediting body. There are currently 3 that are utilized in the fitness industry. NCCA is the National Commission for Certifying Agencies. That's the credentialing or the accrediting body of the Institute for Credentialing Excellence, which is ICE. This is the Distance Education Accreditation Commission, and then ANSI is the American National Standards Institute, which is usually paired up with ISO, which is the International Standards Organization. So there are 3 that could potentially accredit a certification program in the fitness industry. Most organizations who have chosen to pursue accreditation have pursued it through NCCA. NCCA is widely accepted as kind of the gold standard for accreditation of certification programs in the fitness industry for various reasons, but it just has been historically. I'll fly through this really quick. It'll be in your handouts as well, but it's just another comparison between the certificate program and the actual professional certification and kind of what some of the differences are. And I would say ultimately the difference is the certification is a measurement of knowledge or competency, regardless of how you obtained it. The certificate program is directly connected to the education that corresponds with it. And this is very rigorous. This is oftentimes pretty easy, okay? And therefore it generally doesn't have it should not have as much value. It's certainly not a legally defensible process of gaining a credential. For example, if you hurt a client and all you had was a kettlebell specialty certificate, well, a good lawyer is really going to scrutinize what did you have to do to get that? What did you have to do to keep that? How rigorous was the program? What did you actually learn? How was that knowledge measured? And most certificate programs just simply will not stand up to that kind of scrutiny. In the fitness industry right now, there is only one certificate program that has earned certificate program accreditation, and that is the flexologist certification, I think, that comes from the Stretch Labs. So that's the only one right now that has actually earned accreditation for a specialty certificate. Now, there are some other programs that are probably better identified as specialty certificates, but they have actually pursued and obtained NCCA accreditation. And you'll see some of those in a little bit as well. I don't know how they did it, to be honest, but somehow they did it. Okay, so why is this important? Number of reasons. First of all, competency. An accredited certification that has been developed using sound psychometric principles and best practices is valid, reliable, and legally defensible. It can be defended in a court of law if necessary. So that's why it's important. I mean, a lawyer is not a lawyer by just graduating law school. They are a lawyer by passing the bar exam. And I can tell you there are a lot of people who graduate from law school who cannot pass the bar exam. Okay. My daughter went to school for accounting. Her goal was to become a CPA, a certified public accountant. Two of her best friends went through exactly the same undergraduate program. They all graduated high honors. My daughter's the only one of the three that passed the CPA exams. So going through a formal educational program is great, but it's things that you do over the course of time, and the measurement of knowledge is probably not quite as rigorous as it would be on a standardized exam that's trying to capture the universe of everything you should know in a 120 question exam. Okay, so they are more difficult. Don't want to undervalue the degree, because you should get a degree. There are actually only probably about 20% of the trainers out there have a degree related to fitness. So it's not that many, and it's going to give you a step ahead of people in terms of employability, not just today, but down the road as well. So, but it's just one part of your whole preparation process. Public safety is another important one. The overarching purpose of a certification exam like this is to protect the public, to make sure those who are providing services to them are at least minimally competent to do that. And passing the certification exam is only a measurement of minimal competency. It does not mean you're an expert. That's why we have continuing education as a requirement to keep that. Minimum competency means that, say, for example, the passing score on our personal training exam is 70, which it is. You have a 70 or a 71. Your certification looks exactly the same as somebody who has a 93. It doesn't matter. You passed the test. It's a pass-fail situation. If you have a 69, then you're below the threshold for what we have identified as minimally competent, and you cannot have our certification until you increase your knowledge. Okay, so it is. We call it the cut score because that's the cutoff. If you don't get that score, you're not certified. But it only reflects minimal competency. That's been the criticism by others who don't believe in accreditation. Like, well, anybody can pass the test. I'm like, not anybody can pass the test. Our current pass rate for our personal training exam is 56%. Okay, so not everybody's passing the test, but these are people who criticize it because they've never taken the test. They're making assumptions about it that they just clearly do not understand. And our pass rates have dropped because of COVID. That's actually a phenomenon in all different industries, is that pass rates for credentialing exams have gone down for various reasons.
Do you remember what it was before COVID?
Our pass rate for PT was about 63%. And it's been hovering just a little bit below 60% for the last couple of years. Group exercise saw the same thing. It used to be in the low 80s, and now it's in the mid 70s.
Do you have data for what Concordia, whenever we house those
Yeah.
exams, do you know like how well the students?
Well, I do have it. I don't have it off the top of my head, but yes, I have it on my computer somewhere. Yeah, I'd have to dig it out.
I'd be interested to see like how well
Because
prepared they were.
prepared students for that.
Right.
Well, yeah, generally speaking, and we don't do as many live review workshops anymore just because of COVID and the demand for those has not come back yet. But generally speaking, somebody who attends the live review workshop does better on the exam because they have the benefit of a review. Somebody who goes to a testing center or does remote online proctoring after trying to prepare by themselves generally doesn't do as well because either they actually didn't prepare or they didn't prepare as well as they thought they should. And usually if we host a workshop at a college or university versus a YMCA, the college or university will do a little bit better because you got people who are
used to studying.
they're used to studying, they're studying that information. All right, risk management, another big one. Len, I saw you had a class across the hall.
Yeah.
Law. What
Yeah.
book are you using out of curiosity?
Sharks. Mhm.
This textbook, it's a pretty big textbook. It's specific to law in the fitness industry. But I have a couple quotes from there. First of all, employers have a vested interest to hire credentialed and competent employees because they can be held liable for negligent acts of their employees while performing their jobs through the legal doctrine called respondent superior, which imposes vicarious liability on the employer for negligent acts of their employee.
Sarah could have told you that. She's in that class last semester.
Trainer hurts a client sues the trainer, the supervisor, the club's insurance company, anybody who's potentially going to have money in their pockets, they're going to sue you. So having a certification is not going to guarantee that you're never going to hurt somebody, that you're never going to get sued, but it's going to be part of your defense as to how you were qualified to do what you were doing. Another quote from that book is, it's evident from court rulings that employers can be liable for the negligent acts of their employees and their failure to properly hire and also to train competent staff. So part of the hiring process is not just to identify that they have a certification, but to identify that it's actually legitimate, because a lot of people will lie about their credentials. I've got a few counterfeit certifications in my office from people who claim to be NETA certified who actually were not.
They just did a little Adobe Acrobat change in the.
In the old days, they would get a copy of somebody's certificate, they white out the name, the date, they photocopy it, give it to the employer, and it looks just like their own. So we do digital credentials now, which they're issued electronically, but they still have a feature where you can print the PDF. And then you could potentially alter that, but they have QR codes on them too. So if the employer is diligent about at least scanning the QR code, they can verify whether or not it's authentic. But you would be shocked at how much fraud there is in terms of credentialing, not just in the fitness industry, but in general. So we have, and Lana knows this because she's on our certification board. Over the last few years, we've revoked maybe a half dozen certifications because people had counterfeit CPR certifications. So they don't even take
the lazy the update to go to a 3-hour training.
Yep.
And instead they lie and doctor their cards and send those in.
And we don't always catch them, but a lot of times we do. Hopefully most of the time.
You would hope their employers again would catch that as an employer.
Not always. Okay. Another reason to get certified is employment. I mean, it's going to make you more employable. This is a voluntary process, and because there isn't laws that drive this, employers get to decide which certifications they're going to accept and not accept. If they're a well-informed employer, they should actually accept anything that's accredited, but some of them are kind of narrowly focused on what they know is what they know. So if they only know ACE, then they only accept ACE, or if they only know NASM, then that's all they accept. And sometimes their logic is simply no more than brand recognition. I recognize that logo, so that's the one I accept. And they don't really know much more about it than that, to be quite honest. I know because I've had conversations with these people who don't accept NETA because they've never heard of us. Okay, well, we're actually the second oldest certifying body in the industry. We've been around since 1977. ACE has not, NASM has not, AFA has not. The only one older than us is ACSM, to be quite honest, but we are small. And there's reasons for that, but that doesn't discredit what we have accomplished over those 47 plus years. So, achievement, some people just do it for a personal goal so they can be happy and feel like they've accomplished something, which they have. And then marketing is another one, to market your services for your employer, to market you as being certified. I will say you have to be cautious there too, because you want to properly represent your certifications. You don't want to misstate things either intentionally or unintentionally that would mislead the public. And if the employer claims that all staff are certified, then they better make sure they're all certified, because there have been some lawsuits against clubs who have misrepresented the credentials of their staff, which isn't the source of the lawsuit, but it's one thing that comes up in the lawsuit when somebody's hurt, is the fact that I was told this was a certified trainer and turns out they are not. There was a lawsuit against a social media what do you call it, influencer
Mhm.
down in Texas not too long ago who was selling individualized nutrition and training programs through social media. And she wasn't certified or anything like that. And she wasn't even providing individualized programs. She was giving everybody pretty much the same thing. And I don't remember what the settlement was, but she ended up paying the state of Texas several $100,000 in fines for the misrepresentation of her services. Regulation, like I've said a couple times now, that it's not regulated by the government. It's a voluntary process to hold and maintain a certification. There has been many attempts to regulate, and some of this has kind of died down over the last couple of presidential administrations, but prior to that, there was a lot of attempts, some of them going back to the mid-80s to try to regulate personal trainers in particular. Most of them have focused on personal trainers, but some of them have also included group exercise instructors and yoga instructors as well. None of them have succeeded with the exception of Washington, D.C., which again was repealed after it passed. So currently, it's just self-regulated, and it's self-regulated through industry recommendations. And the original one comes back from 2005, when IHRSA, which is the International Health Racket and Sports Club Association, came out with this statement, which basically said that IHRSA health clubs, which is somebody who's a member of the IHRSA network, should only hire personal trainers holding at least one current certification from an organization that has begun third-party accreditation. Because at that time, there was actually only one, maybe two certifications that had actually completed accreditation. So this was kind of the beginning of all of the other organizations, including NIDA, sort of making that movement toward professionalizing their programs and actually getting this third-party accreditation. So back at this time, it was ACE had theirs accredited, PT and Group X, and NSCA had theirs accredited. Yeah, NSCA had theirs accredited, the CSCS and the personal training. Outside of that, nobody else had any kind of accreditation. It's also a recommendation. Well, I should go back here. So NCCA at that time was identified as the recognized credentialing body, accrediting body, but since then they've also added to the list the DEAC and then more recently ANSI. I think this one was just added within the last few years. And, all right, so NCCA continues to be the most widely utilized accrediting body. As of today, there are 13 organizations that hold NCCA accreditation for personal training certs, and then just 4 that are NCCA accredited for group exercise / fitness certifications. There was 5 until late last year when one of the companies either lost or decided to discontinue it. There are also recommendations in ACSM's health fitness standard facility standards and guidelines. That is the same really for both Group X and PT, is that trainers or instructors should hold a nationally recognized and accredited certification. And the one that they identify in the footnote is NCCA. There are others, of course, but that's the one that they identify. And again, probably because it's the most prevalent in the fitness industry. So how do you get accreditation? This is a large part of what I do for NIDA, is to make sure we not only have it, but that we maintain it. There are 23 standards. They're kind of broken out into different areas. So there's purpose, governance, and resources. Now, Dr. Huberty's on she's on our certification board, which is one of the requirements for accreditation, is that you have to have an independent, autonomous governing body. So our president and executive director cannot make decisions about certification issues. He can decide how much we charge, but he can't decide what the passing score is going to be. He can't decide what the eligibility criteria will be. He can't decide what the recertification requirements will be. That's up to our board, and they function independent of our executive director and our actual organization. They are supported financially by us, but we cannot make the decisions. They make the decisions. And there's 9 people on our certification board right now representing different segments of the industry around the country. And then we also have a public member, and his role on the board is to represent the consumer, the people who are going to utilize these services, to give us that perspective of what would a consumer think about this or that or this. He does not work in the fitness industry. He's not educated in fitness. He doesn't have certifications in fitness. He is a public person. He's a consumer of fitness services. There are responsibilities to the stakeholders, like what we have to make available to them in terms of information before they pursue certification, how the test is developed and administered, how people maintain certification, which is recertification requirements. And I love this one because people will say, oh, you just make us recertify to get more money. I'm like, no, we make you recertify because we're required to. So, no, we can't make it free because how are we going to pay my 7-figure salary, right? But totally care. And then quality assurance and maintaining accreditation are the last standards. Now, there's 23 standards, but each one of them has what are called essential elements. Those are actually the things, the tasks that you have to demonstrate compliance to in order to satisfy the corresponding standard. So if you go through and you add up all of the essential elements, there's actually 86 things that we have to demonstrate compliance with in order to get and maintain accreditation. So although people will say all you have to do is pay a fee, no, you pay a fee to be a member of ICE. To get accredited, you go through what sometimes takes 12 months of scrutiny of your program to get accredited. These are the programs that currently have NCCA accreditation for personal trainer certs. Keep in mind that NCCA only accredits the program. They do not accredit the organization. So it is incorrect to say NETA is NCCA accredited because we are not. NETA's personal training certification is, but they only look at the certification programs. They're not accrediting the organization as a whole. That's not what they do. So in alphabetical order, these are the first of 13. And then here's the rest. Of course, you'll get a little call out in purple there. This is updated as of last week. There was a point at which I think we had 16 organizations that had accredited PT certs. That's decreased for a couple reasons. One, NASM purchased 2 of those smaller ones, and then ACE consumed the Cooper Institute's program. So those people, through a predetermined process of showing the reciprocity between the certification programs, were allowed to transfer their certificates from one organization to the next. But there's actually a long process you have to go through with NCCA in order to get permission to do that. ISSA does not have the ISSA personal training certification is not accredited, but they have now purchased the NCCPT programs. And they offer them, but they oftentimes will misrepresent theirs as being accredited when it's not. It's actually the NCCPT that is. So if you decide to go toward that organization, you have to be really careful as to what you're purchasing because sometimes it gets switched on you. And then for a group exercise, we've got just 4, NETA included. So including NCCPT and ACE, there's only 3 organizations that hold accreditation for both PT and Group X. AFA used to be on this list last fall. They either lost or decided to discontinue accreditation. I don't really know for sure which happened, but they are no longer, that program's no longer accredited. And then there's other types of industry certifications as well. ACSM has more clinical certifications. Some of you are probably familiar with CSCS through NSCA, that's accredited. There is a accredited Pilates program. And then you'll see that the NCCPT has an indoor group cycling, a strength training specialist, and a yoga that are actually all NCCA accredited. By definition, they're probably more appropriate as specialty certificates, but they were able to demonstrate that they were worthy of accreditation for those programs. So they're accredited. Okay. And there's a URL down here too. These are all publicly available on the ICE website through their NCCA program directory. So if you ever want to verify if a program is accredited, that's where you would go to do it. And it'll have the date through which their accreditation is valid. So ours is valid through July 31st of 2027. It's a 5-year accreditation. Every 5 years, you have to reapply and demonstrate compliance with the updated standards. I'm going to go through this really quickly because it's probably not too relevant to you, but just visually, I want you to see all of the different steps that are involved in developing a certification exam. Now, Jen, you've participated in some of these steps for us too. from the initial step of doing that role delineation study or the job task analysis, which is to define what a personal trainer or a group exercise instructor should know, to validate that through a national survey, to develop the exam content outline, which guides the questions on the exam. Then you write the questions, you review the questions, you edit the questions, you test the questions until we know they're valid and reliable. Then they make it to an exam, which then you take as the candidate. You either, well, we do a cut score study over here too, that determines the passing score. So if it's going to be 67 or 70 or whatever the case may be, but there's actually a 2-day study that we have to perform with subject matter experts to determine what is the cut score. Mathematically, what should it be? So let's see, we got base column instruction, review the form, cut score, administer, score. And then we have to do ongoing analysis. So every year we do analysis of the exams and also the items on the exam to make sure that they're performing statistically at acceptable levels. And we look at things like p-values, which is just simply the pass rate for the exam, but we also look at item difficulty and discrimination values for each item. So how many people get it right? How many people get it wrong? Are the people who pass the exam getting it right? Are the people who fail the exam getting it wrong? Or is that flipped? And are they picking the distractors, the ones that are not right? Because if nobody picks the ones that are not right, then they're not good distractors. So we go through and look at all of that to make sure that the items, each individual item actually performs statistically on the test. And then we report all that to NCCA every year. I'm in the process of doing that right now for 2023. So anybody who says that somebody's just sitting in an office making up questions, that's not how it works.
Long process.
Long process. So this might be the slide that you guys are interested in finally. So how do you select and then earn a certification? Which one is the right one for you? I wish I could say NETA is the best one for you, but it might not be. I mean, we're one of many, and you have to decide which one fits your personal and professional goals, to be quite honest. So what do you look for? Well, first of all, where do you plan to work? And what does that employer require? Because each employer is going to have their own requirements or recommendations or preferences. And if your heart is set on working for XYZ company, then you want to do a little research and see what XYZ company wants you to have before you go invest hundreds or sometimes thousands of dollars getting a certification only to find that that's not the one they want. So do a little bit of research in that regard. And then what type of population do you intend to serve? If you're just going to personal train anybody who wants to be personal trained, then entry-level personal training certification is fine. But if you're going to work more in clinical settings, or if you want to work with athletes, then maybe you want to choose a certification that's a little bit more geared toward those populations. Or at minimum, you want to get that baseline personal training cert and then add specialty certificates on top of it to get you to where you want to be. So that's kind of more of a personal reflection. Where do you want to do and where do you want to do it? Review the exam candidate handbook. For accredited certification exams, we're required to have a candidate handbook, which provides all of the information you need to know in order to make a decision about pursuing that certification, which includes the exam content outline, which is a detailed breakdown of everything that's going to be potentially included on the test. So you should look at those. They're going to have eligibility requirements, cut score information, pass rates, fees, recertification requirements, process for requesting special accommodations for the exam if you have a learning disability or a physical impairment. It's going to have all that information. So going to any of these organizations on their website, look for exam candidate handbook, and that's going to be your best source of information to start making that decision. The next thing is prepare for the exam. I cannot underscore that enough. The number one reason people fail the exam is they're just not prepared. If I had a nickel for every time somebody said, well, I've been exercising all my life, or I work out at the gym all the time, I know this. I said, well, driving a car is not the same as fixing a car. So you have to study. You absolutely have to study. How much, how long, that depends on what you already have. If you're going through a formal educational program and you have some experience, you're probably not going to have to prepare as much. You still have to prepare, but probably not as much as somebody who has worked as an accountant all their life and now wants to pursue their passion of fitness. They're gonna have more work to do because they don't have that foundational knowledge and experience that somebody else might have. And then, represent your credentials appropriately. Accredited certifications, we actually have a requirement to monitor and discipline people who are not representing them properly. But we also have a defined way for you to use them. So the specific title that you would use and the specific acronym, if there is one, that you would put after your name. For our personal trainer, it's NETA-Certified Personal Trainer. That's the accepted title. The acronym is NETA-CPT. If you're going to put it after your name, that's what it should be. You can't just put CPT, because how many CPT programs are there? How's the consumer going to know which one you have if they're going to verify that? So it has to be as we've identified it to be. My personal opinion is that you should only put behind your name a terminal degree, like your master's or your PhD, an accredited certification, or a state granted license or credential. Everything else is just made up alphabet soup that really shouldn't be after your name, okay? There's no law that says you can't do that, but I'm just saying from a professional perspective, I would keep it limited to terminal degrees, state issued licenses or statutory certifications, and then accredited certifications, and that's it. Not specialty certificates. You don't usually list those after your name. And then engage in continuing education and recertification. Every organization is required to have a time-limited credential. So most of them in the fitness industry are anywhere from 2 to 4 years, with probably 2 being the more common among some of the bigger organizations. So every 2 years, you have to apply to recertify. In order to be eligible, you have to usually earn a certain number of CECs and maintain your CPR AED certification. There might be other requirements, but in a nutshell, that's usually what you have to do. Standard 21 of the accreditation standards is maintain maintenance of certification. So we must require periodic recertification. They don't say how periodic, but we have to determine how often, and we have to publish for them our rationale for that duration. Why do we choose 2 years? Well, one reason is that most CPR certifications are valid for 2 years. So that ensures that we can monitor people to make sure they keep their CPR certifications valid. That's not to say there aren't going to be times between periods that people might lapse in their CPR, but at least every 2 years, we can verify that they still have it. There's other reasons in our rationale as well, but that's probably one that is more objective. Yeah. So they have to be time limited, blah, blah, blah. The program has to have a mechanism to verify that you've met the requirements for recertification. I will say that being small has an advantage for us because we look at every single application for recertification. Our customer service department processes it, and then I audit it to make sure it's been processed correctly and that all the requirements are met. Bigger organizations just do not have the human resources to monitor every single application. So the big companies, they usually audit 10% of all renewal applications, which means 90% of the people are on the honor system. Now, you don't know if you're going to get selected for the random audit. So we hope that it's, people are being honest, but in a given calendar year, we probably reject about 500 to 600 applications, either for non-compliance or for incorrect information. And sometimes on rare cases for fraudulent misrepresentation of credentials. So I would like to say that our certifications have a little bit more integrity and that we look at everyone, whereas the bigger companies can only look at a certain percentage and the rest of the people kind of get by. Now, our people think that's a disadvantage because they don't sometimes like us looking so closely at things they submit to us. Records retention, this actually feeds into the essential element that at minimum, we have to verify the names and current certificates and if applicable, their certification number. So if somebody calls our office and says, is Joe Smith actually certified by NETA as a personal trainer? We are required to tell them either yes or no. Most organizations, including us, will do this through a publicly available database. So you can go to our website and click on verify Anita certification. You type in the first name, last name, or even just the last name and the state, or even just the zip code and nothing else. And it'll show you all the people that hold the credential. That's just for PT and Group X, because those are the only 2 accredited ones we have. Our digital credentials. On the digital credential, it also has the option to verify credential. These are secured through blockchain technology, which is beyond my understanding, but basically it means that it cannot be faked electronically. And each printed certificate, if they choose to print it, has a QR code on it as well. And unless you can figure out how to generate a QR code specific to our certifications, you're not going to fake that. And that's actually one of the ways we usually catch people with fake CPRs is American Red Cross and American Heart Association, and now Ashley, they all have QR codes on them too. And people will change the date, but they don't think we're going to scan the QR code. And that's when we find the mismatch and start investigating. So. And then US reps, you can also use the United States Registry to validate credentials that are held by somebody who is certified by an organization that belongs to CREP. So again, that's going to be the 5 organizations that participate in that. And then I would also encourage employers, the last time I did this presentation, it was 2 employers, but I would encourage you to verify CPR too, because honestly, it may look like it's legitimate, but it may not be. So for the organizations that allow you to publicly verify those, I would at least take advantage of that. Not all CPR providers do that, but the more recognizable ones certainly do. Do I have internet connect? I probably do.
Oh, no, you
No,
probably
it's
don't.
because these are all hyper.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so that's actually it. These are some of the references for you. I would like to be a reference for you too. So if you guys ever have questions or anything, you certainly can feel free to shoot me an email or give me a call.
So Michael, just
Yes.
to clarify, if you're looking at getting a personal training certification, there's 13 different companies that are accredited, right? That offer them.
NCCA, yes.
NCCA accredited, which is the standard, right?
Yep.
And they are all required to have basically the same content on their tests.
No.
No, okay.
When the first step
They have
in
to
that,
meet the same standards. They can have content.
well, they have to meet the same standard, but the standards apply to certifications in all different industries. So it's not specific to fitness or even personal training.
Oh, okay.
So the first step in developing the exam was that role delineation or the practice analysis. And Jen, did you participate in that? Yes, you did. Okay. So we get a group of subject matter experts together. It has to be a diverse group, geographically in particular, but also by type of employer. So nonprofit, for-profit, municipal, rec centers, et cetera, et cetera. So I think on our PT role delineation, we probably had 17 people, plus me, plus our psychometrician, who is Dr. Jim Henderson. He used to be the psychometrician for ACE. He's retired now, but he does contract work out of North Carolina. So it was a series of probably 4 meetings, virtual meetings. So the total time was maybe 40 hours, if not more, of work. And it's conversation. It's, first of all, we define what is a personal trainer. And then we ask the question, what does a personal trainer do? And then what does a personal trainer need to know to do that competently? And this expands out to the exam content outline, which is pretty detailed. We have 5 areas of responsibility, and then each one has tasks, and then each task has a knowledge statement. So after this is all done, we put it out to a national survey. I think we had almost 900 people respond to our survey. And they go through and they say, you had a diverse group of 17 or 18 people, and they did a great job, but we think they missed this. Now, on our national validation survey, nobody had any objections or any edits. Everything that our group did was representative of what people said personal trainers do and need to know. So then we take that and we make the test. Now, ACE, NASM, they're all going to do exactly the same thing, but with different subject matter experts and different psychometrician and with different perspectives. And you would think, because we're all trying to define the same role, that it would look the same, but it doesn't.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
No, we're good. Thanks, Joe. How about nuts and bolts for the students? Some of them are graduating in May, and maybe they're like, I do want to do some personal training to either tide me over or as a professional gig. What are their options for talk out a timeline, work backwards, and then if they decide NITA or ACE or whoever,
To get certified?
yeah, to get certified, like what are their action steps?
Well, let's say if you register for our computer-based exam, which is administered through remote online proctoring, you'll get an invitation to schedule today. The first available appointment will be 72 hours from right now.
Oh, wow.
So you
Okay.
just,
So you could take it within 72 hours.
Okay.
But I still suggest you study.
Yeah.
We do at minimum recommend people devote at least 30 to 45 days of self-directed study. Now they can do that with whatever study tools they want. We have a free study guide on our website. It's got recommended readings. It's got a chapter by chapter breakdown for our book, if that's what you choose to use. We have online modules, we have practice exam, we have workbook, but you study however you want to study. But at minimum, we say 30 to 45 days. Now, at maximum, from the day you register, you must take the test within 1 year. So after a year, you're no longer eligible. You have to pay a fee to extend your
Sure.
eligibility period. With NASM, I think their eligibility period is 90 days.
Okay.
And I think for ACE, it's 6 months. So every organization determines how long they're going to let that linger out there.
Yeah.
But we give people a year. Shockingly, a lot of people never even take the test. Every year, we probably have hundreds of people who have paid for it, but just never take it.
How many people sign up for the gym and don't go though, right? I
Yeah.
mean, that-
We'll never know why they
Yeah.
didn't do it. They just didn't do it.
So is it, do people not go to testing locations anymore? Is that like, I mean, I haven't done it in decades, so,
Yeah,
okay,
they-
you can, okay.
We don't personally use testing centers anymore
Okay.
for one big reason is that we're a small company and most testing centers require minimum volumes.
Sure,
From a financial perspective,
Yeah.
they want big customers.
Yeah.
So,
okay,
COVID was kind of a blessing for us because although we were already working on remote online proctoring to get that accepted by NCCA, they were not yet accepting it. And then when COVID hit, it accelerated their need to accept it.
Sure.
And although we were ahead of everybody else and actually got our hands slapped because of it, they allowed us to be part of their pilot program to demonstrate that there was equivalency between that modality and other testing modalities so that we could proceed. And so now we offer remote online proctoring, which you can do anywhere as long as you have a computer that meets the requirements and internet connection. And then we do also do paper pencil exams at review workshops at the conclusion of review workshops, but
Sure.
we just don't have many of those anymore
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
facilities have not wanted to
Mhm.
host.
Mhm.
And frankly, we've had to change our model because things have gotten so expensive to fly
Mhm.
people around to
Mhm.
teach workshops and to stay in hotels and their own cars. It just
Yeah.
was getting cost
Yeah,
prohibitive.
for sure. So if you don't have to wait until you graduate if this is like, or I mean, have it on your radar now and.
Yeah, and the other thing, in the Twin Cities, not many people do this, but some people do. You can also come to our office in Plymouth and take the test. You have to schedule it, but if you don't want to monkey with the technology of the computer, and you just want to come take the paper test,
Yeah.
you can come do that.
that's the benefit of having NITA in the cities. Yeah, because then it's like this, even though you're a national company, you just happen to be housed right here.
Yeah. Only one in Minnesota. ACEs in California, ASMs in Arizona, ACSMs in Indiana, NSCAs in Colorado. They're all.
Have you guys, any of you looked into taking the test yet? You have, which one did you look at?
I was just looking at some of them and it's like, cause I seen like, I remember talking about accredited program before. And then I seen like a website that was like, take your test right now, pay $300 and get your certificate.
A certificate is not a certificate. That's what you have.
Right, you gotta read that wording, yeah.
Yeah,
Because the word accredited is abused sometimes too, because there's no laws that.
no
protect the
governance
use
of
of
this.
it.
It's like the Wild West.
So if somebody says we're nationally accredited, well, then you have to supply who is actually accredited, because some people will say that. As a small nonprofit, we try our best to keep our prices reasonable. And they're kind of in the middle in terms of how much it costs to just do the testing. There are for-profit companies in the fitness industry, and you can usually tell by how much they're charging. And they're for-profit, so they're charging a lot of money for, at the end of the day, it's something that's really the same.
Mhm.
And there are some that on the internet, you can just pay $29.99.
And you get it.
Your dog or your cat can be a certified personal trainer. That's all there is to it. Buyer beware. Stay in school, kid. I did my bachelor's at the U of M. I did my master's there as well. There's about 20 years in between the two. And the master's was a personal goal, and the bachelor's was, I thought that's what you were supposed to
Right.
do. And turns out you are. But if I had not had those, it would not have been the same career progression for me, quite honestly. So, I mean, I could still be a trainer anywhere I wanted to if all I had was a training certification. But if you want to make it a career and move into different roles and have more responsibilities, then the degree is what's going to set you apart.